Tenemos el placer en la serie de hoy, el capítulo de hoy, de tener con nosotros al productor, DJ, músico, Andrew. Andrew, yo no sé cómo pronunciar tu apellido.
Andrew Yeomanson.
Yeomanson. Sí. Ok, I
Sí.
was wondering. Entonces, esta es la serie Miami Alternativo, una colaboración de Alafia Creative Entertainment y Artistnator. Y estamos en el capítulo de Andrew, DJ Spam Allstars. Hi, Andrew. It's a pleasure
welcome.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. So this is a conversation I would like some people to know about you, because I know a lot of people know you, but a lot of people don't. So, and I'm also thinking about people all over the world, right? Cuba, Latin America. I know some people know you there, but still. So tell me about you. I know you're Canadian. I know you live in Miami, but what happened? Like, why you are here?
Well, my father's English, and my mother's Venezuelan. One of her parents was American. Her mother was Venezuelan. She was born and raised in Venezuela and Haiti. They lived all over Latin America. My parents met in Venezuela. That's where they got married. Then they lived in Ecuador. But due to things happening in their lives, they were in Canada when for 10 years my father had a business in the late 60s to mid 70s. He was importing things from South America, artesanía, actually like the almost like the dress you have, things like that. He had all those kind of tunics and stuff from Mexico, Central America. He was traveling, and his store was called the Inca Poncho, and that was how they lived from when we were born until like about 1977, and my father sold his business. We moved back to England for a couple of years. And then nothing much going on. It was like a bad economic time for England in the late 1970s. And we ended up coming to Florida in 1980. And in 1980, right around that time, we moved to Colombia. My father was working for a bank here. And we lived in Colombia from 1980 to 1983. Then we moved back to Florida for about a year. And that time I was in 10th grade. And after that year, we moved back to England.
Wow.
That was the middle 80s. So it was a great time to be in England then. And then it was my last 2 years of high school. High school was really cool. I could leave the campus when I didn't have a class. And so I was going record hunting all over. I went from being into heavy metal to being into like Jamaican music and dub and dancehall music. And so for me, I was just eating it up and having all kinds of musical experiences and like just soaking up everything that London was in the 1980s. I could see any band that I wanted to see that I was interested in would play there. I would sneak out. I would lie. I would do whatever I had to do to do the things I wanted to do in London. And I did. And I had a great time. It was 3 years. And then when I went to Canada when I was 19 again to go to university. So I was in Toronto for like 2 years, like 88, 89. And then university wasn't very interesting to me. I was still into record collecting.
What were you studying at the time?
I wanted to, so I was doing anthropology, sociology. It was like liberal arts, but really I wanted to do African studies, you know. But once I was there, I just realized that it was not where I wanted to be. I didn't know what it was about it, but there was a couple of years there where I hadn't found my path. I was still hardcore into music, no matter what. I just didn't really recognize the possibility of a musical career for myself. So I was just kind of following music and doing whatever. I was buying records like crazy. I wasn't creating, but I was like, music was everything. And so then I also became a bicycle courier at that time. So when I was living in Toronto, I was like, so I got really fit and I was into cycling. And I had the idea to do this like bike tour. So I went and I took my bike like from Holland to Spain, and then I stayed in London for a little while, and that's when I came to Miami in 1990. Like after I did all that stuff, then I came here.
How was that Miami of the 90s for you?
It was great. So I have my aunt who I'm very close with, and she's lived here since the 70s. And so when I moved here, I went, and she lives out by Fontainebleau. So she has like, I lived in the utility closet of her apartment for like 1 year. I just had like a bed I would roll out, and I had decided when I moved here, I was like, okay, I'm going to try for 10 years to do music. Like I'll do 10 years. I'm 20 now. And I'll do from when I'm 20 to when I'm 30, I'm going to do music. And if nothing happens from that, I'll still be 30. I could still go get a normal job or start a career, go back to school, or, and so Miami was super interesting. So then I got my guitar out of storage. I set up my turntable. I had a bicycle only. I got a job at TGI Fridays at International Mall. And then I started riding my bike to all the record stores that I could, and I started like getting records. And then I was studying the records and learning what I was hearing from the records on the guitar. And around that time, I got these records that were my grandparents' records too. They were from when they lived in Haiti, and they had records that were like voodoo music, and they had like early compa music, like early Haitian big bands and stuff, because they lived there in the 50s. And so that was super interesting. And that was the only thing, like I had experienced other kinds of Latin music when I lived in Colombia, but I didn't really, Haitian culture was super interesting to me. So then I started kind of like delving into that. And then plus one of the guys that worked at TGI Fridays was an older dude that played guitar. And so when he found out that I was playing guitar, he was like, so I wanted to jam. And so then I started with this guy who was like, he was like already drinking too much, but he was an incredible guitarist, it's like, so then I started running around with him, and he had another friend, and we would play up around here in North Miami. It would just be like 3 guitars, but I got more and more interested in like that style. And then from listening to the voodoo music, I started getting interested in like, why isn't there like voodoo music mixing with like the other, why is it so separate, And so I walked into a place on South Beach one day, and it was like a club that existed at that time called the Stephen Talk House. It was like kind of like a legendary live music club that existed for a few years. And there was this band on stage, and they were with the voodoo drums, but they were with guitar and bass and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, this is just the type of band that I've been imagining. And it was Jean Sebon was one of the people in that band. The band was called, which is Inés Parlatier's father. The band was called Collection Kazakh. And so I'm watching these guys. I'm like, shit, this is great. This is like just the type of band I want to be. And so I'm just standing there, and so there's like 3 guys standing next to me, and we're just like, and they're like, oh, so what, you're a musician? They're Haitian guys. And they're like, oh yeah. And they're just like, what do you play? I said, go guitar. So we'll give me your number. So like 2 weeks later, these guys call me for a gig. And then I'm playing with them, and so there was a band called Lava Las Band, and they were just like a really intense, like, it was like political, because it was, Lava Las was the Aristide movement, in that time. So right at that time, Raul Cedras was the like military dictator of Haiti. Aristide hadn't got to power yet, so Lava Las was like the Aristide movement. And they kind of doomed their band by being so political in a sense, because even in Miami, there's a lot of like factions, and then you add like the voodoo stuff into that. It's like, so, but it was, for me, it was like, wow, this, I was like 22. I was going to these, like, I got to be see a part of a world that like a lot of people wouldn't get to see. And, so it was incredible. And the drumming, forget it, like I've never experienced drumming on that. I mean, I've been to like, I've had I've been to, Santeria stuff and this and that. And I've been around drumming my whole life at this point. But the drumming, the voodoo drumming of Haiti is on another level. And so,
communicates, right?
Huh?
It communicates.
It just goes straight through you. And some people, then that's when they get a spirit, So I really, that was just amazing. But it was also very unstable. And, I was just I put so much of my energy into this thing, and then one guy quit, and then the whole thing fell apart, and it was very, so I was sort of heartbroken, and but I had found this little place that was a little recording studio, and because I was the one that was always like wanting to rehearse the band. I was like, come on guys, we gotta because I needed to practice, and I wanted to everybody practice, and I just like playing, so I was always pushing the rehearsals, and so I found this little place by the airport, 57th Avenue, right off 836, and there's like a jet ski Yamaha dealership, and there used to be a recording studio. It was like a hole in the wall place. And it had just a little 8-track tape machine, and it was perfect for me. The guys were really nice. They were totally not judging what I was doing. I was just experimenting. And so I started going to record my own stuff. So that was like, at that point, what happened was I put so much energy into this project. It wasn't really, I didn't own it. It wasn't my culture, it wasn't my thing. I was part of it. It was amazing. But like, I just kind of decided, okay, well, I always have to have something that I'll be putting energy into that I could at least call my own, whatever, if I'm a part of somebody else's stuff too. So that's kind of when the band started, really, like 93, 94. Because the first or second thing that I recorded in that studio was like a song that had a piece of a commercial for the Spam meat. Oh, okay. And I made a song with a montuno. I was wondering, why is Spam? Yeah, everybody asked the question, so I'll tell you right now, you don't even have to ask. So there was a montuno, like a tres part, and I made a little loop with that, and then I had this commercial, which was like really cheesy with the voice. What do you think you're eating? What's in the quiche? And so I thought it was hilarious. I just made it as something. I was not being serious. My way of doing my music was like having no expectations and not being that serious about it. And so it was the first thing, and I thought it was funny that I played for my friends. And then I just started calling it Spam Allstars. And that was kind of how it rolled along. And then because of the Haitian band, I met Neil Lara, and I started playing in his group at that time. I was playing guitar for him. And the gig with him lasted like 3 years, touring and recording. Cool. And that kind of ended around 1998. And that's when I really kind of like reactivated the Spam Allstars as being like, okay, I'm going to have a gig every week. I'm going to try to, I don't know, that was, and I also sort of was more thinking of I could work as a DJ.
How was that? How was like this transition? Because you are one of these few musicians that could do DJing, and at the same time, you have a band together, which now is normal. Everybody does it. In other places, but here in Miami, I don't know, with the quality that you do your stuff, I don't see many people doing it. So how was that?
I mean, when I perform with the group, I see it as a completely. It's almost, I wouldn't even call it DJing. I'm playing machines. Yeah. So I was just thinking in terms of, at that time, well, I'm collecting vinyl. The vinyl thing is kind of falling off. Most guys are doing now CDs at that time. I was also doing music. Yeah, I was also doing old school music. So I looked around at the scene. I looked at, there was like nobody really doing that. I thought, I have this huge record collection. I'm buying records everywhere all the time for nothing. I'm into it. I had a little pirate radio show. So I was like, let me see if I can carve a little niche for myself as a vinyl DJ and start with that. And then at the same time, but the band stuff was overlapping because I was sampling from the records that I was getting. I was like having ideas. The radio show was kind of part of that because I had this pirate radio show. These friends of mine had like an illegal station on the beach. And so it was like a dream come true. What I always wanted to have a fantasize over. And I used to listen to pirate radio in London. These guys would come on late at night and they'd play all this crazy stuff. Nice. So I was playing the records that I was finding in the street, and then part of my show would be that I would have to make a new just arrangement, an idea, something, a jump off. And we would play live for like 20, 30 minutes at a time, and then I would DJ, and then we'd play live. It'd be very free form and loose, and there would be spoken word records, totally weird stuff.
Nice.
And so from that, the whole thing was kind of blending. And that's how, a lot of the early shows were like that. I would be DJing and playing, the old Cuban records or the salsa or the funk. Mm-hmm. And then the band would start playing, we would play, and then I was just working myself to death, basically. That's why I'm deaf. I wouldn't even take a break. So I would DJ, then we would play, then I would DJ, then we would play, wow. Then I would DJ. So it all became,
one thing, right?
Yeah,
Tell me about the Fuacata Nights. I know that was an important, part of the career of the band.
Well,
right?
that's how most people. That was really where everything clicked for us. So that was about after 3 years of like doing different nights, mostly starting on South Beach. So we had a few different things. We had like this hip hop night with Snow White. Then we had we had a few things where we were bouncing around, and then we ended up. Eric Fabregat and Ralph De La Portilla, two actor friends of mine, came over to me. I had known these guys already for a very long time, and they said, "No, we went into this place, Hoy Como Ayer. There's not much going on." We said to the owners, "Yeah, we have this band. They're like doing this and this." We were already messing around a little bit with but it wasn't as. We didn't have the full time with Tomas Diaz. It was like. There was usually, our previous thing was usually like a trio of guitar, sax, and my beats. Mm. And then Eric and Ralph said, well, we want to do it at Hoy Como Ayer, but we want to have, can we have Tomas? And can we do it with, can you do it more in Spanish? I was messing with the Spanish records. Like on our first record, there's like a Fidel impersonator and
yeah.
and this and but I was I was all over the map.
Yeah.
And I've kind of stayed all over the map, but this is like we themed it in a certain way and everybody loved it. And so that thing rolled into we just after a month it was full, and then we ran it. I think we did it Hoy Como Ayer for like almost 2 years solid, and it just got too crazy and things were getting like a little out of hand for some people, and I got a little upset. It was just, so we moved, for like a couple years, we moved to downtown. There was a club called IO, so we did our night there for 2 years, and it was good, but it was hard to, people didn't, it was like the neighborhood, everything, like when a venue fits. And we went back then from like 2005 to maybe almost 2017 or 2016.
Yeah.
But things change, so right. So like the whole thing evolved from being this thing that it became from, so it was like this new thing that I really had to check out, and like everybody and anybody went through that club at one time. I mean, it was like crazy. And then it just kind of like, it started to feel like I started to get sad because, it got to be very expensive for people to go. And then I would hear my friends tell me, oh, it's just whatever. Like Miami's very expensive to go out now.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy.
It doesn't matter the neighborhood.
Well, you know what? It does in a way, because if you go to, if you're creative and you follow a scene, then there's always going to be people that are pushing to like do things in a new way, and when we run out of that, then it'll really be time to like move. But like I think as long as there's young people that like are working within a really small budget, they're going to be forced to do, and they're going to work with like little places, and they're going to bring their stuff, and it's still going to be alive. Not
everything could be gentrified in the same way, right? Places are supposed to be different.
It takes a while. They they're never too far behind those people. Mm-hmm. But it's still, to be part of that first wave is exciting. But once that, it's okay. So whatever, you know, we ran it and ran it and ran it, and finally it was time to like just stop, you know.
One of the things I had the opportunity. At that time it was not called Fagata, but I had the opportunity to go to some nights, some Thursdays at Docomaye, and I loved it. I was like, it blew my mind because the quality of what I heard there. I've never heard any sound quality like that in Miami. That's used to be a problem. I don't know if it is still, but for live music, it is. It's kind of like that. You don't listen to good quality sound frequently. And the other thing that really blew my mind was that I was coming from New York at the time. So look, the audience was incredible. I've never seen an audience like that, especially those who were doing like a break dance kind of circle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we used to have a
how do
really
you
good-
how what do you think makes it so special? Like you attract your music attracts this kind of, I would say, ideal audience, mix diverse people from different generations, different cultures.
Well, look at this. Who's on stage? It's the same. So you know, I mean, I think like to a large extent, the good band kind of reflects its audience somewhat. You know, we're all a bit older now, but you know, it's a diverse group of people on stage, and so it's a diverse audience, and that's been amazing to have that. Really, when you have like, we did we did a breakdance. I guess that was our last gig in August. Was the breakdancing festival, the beginning of the Flipside Kings anniversary party at Miami Light Project. So whenever you have like that big breakdancing crowd, it's a whole different energy. You know?
My God.
So when you have like people that are dancing like that, it's great.
But also, you don't only do breakdance. Like the thing that I really I love is that it's one of these few places where you can see or experience what people call the Miami sound. And why the Miami sound? Well, in my case, I think I identify it as the Miami sound because it's informal, it's mixed. It has the electronic vibe that a lot of people like Miami, but it also has a lot of other influences, and they're very well crafted altogether. So you cannot say that this is a particular genre, as in the traditional sense of how the industry call it, right? And that leads me to the question about your relationship with the industry. We need to talk about this, especially in Miami. You are alive, and that's the thing, because we all have our ideas about what the music industry is in Miami, or the lack of it when it comes to music, like for this kind of music, right?
Right.
So how was it? How was this?
I've been 100% independent all the time. So
how do they label you? Where have you fit or not fit?
I can only say that even way back from like day one, when I decided to call my project Spam Allstars, I basically decided for myself at that time that it was going to be always something that I would have to own because of the name itself. Nobody would be able to get there. I was like, nobody would ever want to sign a band called Spam Allstars.
Why?
I thought because it's there was no such thing as internet spam. There was nothing except like, oh yeah, it's this meat product. So I thought it would be so absurd that it wouldn't be, So to me, it was never something that I wanted to participate in terms of, like, hey, I'm looking for a record deal. There was a moment, like when I was playing with Nil, where I would like give my tapes to like some of the people from the label. But that was just, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Like I was not expecting anything. And I think later on when there was actually a little bit of interest, I just was like, my whole thing was that I felt that we would get lost inside of a corporation type of environment, and I felt that knowing my own personality, I would probably not really respond well to that, and so I kind of just like didn't get into that idea very much at all. And then in the end, we were kind of lucky in that we started to do well right at the the height of the CD era. So from our first two CDs, we didn't really sell very many, but then like our second, third, and fourth CDs, I sold a lot because we were gigging a lot, and then CDs cost I don't know, $1 to $2, to produce, and I would always sell for 10, but I sold thousands, and I sold them myself. And then like everybody that was in the band, that everybody participated, so everybody was able to get extra money because of that. And I think that worked out great for us. I don't think it would have worked out the same way if we were with a label. Those type of situations are seldom. So, but now everything's different. Like we're now in a situation where, when I'm not like gigging like 4 nights a week, to nobody buys CDs anymore. The last project I did, I pressed vinyl, because I've been pressing vinyl for years, but I press vinyl because it feels like that's just about the only thing that's worth making if you're going to make a product. But it feels like our audience hasn't really caught up with the vinyl resurgence craze. So and also I'm a terrible salesman. I don't even set up a table. Like I'll barely even, like I'll be like, no, CD for sale. But so, I haven't been selling as much, but I think we did probably much better, just us and our little thing that we did. I think we did better than had we gone, So I think we've like kind of, I've done what I feel comfortable with. I don't think I would have been, I got to experience like the whole label thing being with Nil. I kind of got to see like how that we did it was intimate, like how that he went from like being this artist that was just signed. That's right about just when I started playing with him. And then, they A&R you when you're in the studio. And then once your record's done, and they're really into like, oh, this is a particular song. This is the one we want. And we're going to make a video. And so you're compromising your vision, a lot of times. Yeah, you get to work with great people who can see things a different way, and it's like really wonderful. But then sometimes it really comes down to, it's crazy, because you think that, when you're on a label, it's everybody's job to make everything should be equally important if it's on a label, but it's really, they like play favorites. So it's like, oh, this is the artist we're pushing, and then it's this one we have it, but we're, that's total crap.
Yeah.
So then you have all this stuff that happens within a label, where artists are like basically kissing ass within a label, or doing things, in order to like advance, just so that the label will put more resources into their career. And so it was nothing I ever really wanted to, after. And he had it great. I mean, he had wonderful, wonderful people that really, 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 he had the best of the best people behind him. So nothing bad to say about the whole thing, but I could see, from having that experience, what was going on with it all. And I, even before that, I was very cynical. So, it's been okay.
So tell me, I also think you have a special relationship with Cuban music from old times. I see you as a person who have curated Cuban music in a really particular way. And I know that there are, some people who, have this pure concept of the music, whatever. But what I like about the music you do is, all this influence that you have. And I'm thinking about Afro-Cuban music, but in the bigger, picture, from like the times of, when jazz, Afro-Cuban jazz was a thing, and Latin jazz in the 40s in New York until recently. And also African music. You don't stop there in the influence of Cuba, but also you go even to, beyond. So tell me a little bit about what does it represent for you? And what's your relationship with Cuban music? Like, people know about you in Cuba. What has been your experience?
I don't know about
Tell
that.
me, in the music scene.
No, so really, when I got here, it's about this, the first artist that I got really interested in, Benny Moré, because I found the same records of my grandparents. She had some 45s, my grandmother, Benny Moré and Perez Prado, the Mambos. So I heard the Mambos, I was like, I instantly liked that. And then I got into Arsenio Rodriguez like hardcore because I was just soaking up anything I could for guitar, and then I was like, "Where's the guitar in Latin music? Where's the guitar in Latin music?" And then when I found Arsenio, then I was like, "Oh, this. I'm really super into this." And so I have found a guy that had a record store in downtown Miami. His name is Carlos Suarez, and Carlos Suarez had a store at that time called Flippers. And so when I went into Flippers and started talking to Carlos said, "No, that's a tres." And I said, "Wow, okay, I gotta get a tres. How can I get it? What's a tres? Like, how do you tune a tres? What is it?" It wasn't like you could Google that stuff. No. So I was like on a quest. And so that was also kind of connected me with Nil, because Nil's a tres player. Although his tres is like a baritone, it's still that setup. Yeah. And so I ended up like working for Carlos at the store. That was I was waiting table still, but I started working for Carlos at Flippers, and then Carlos was like the best educator of Cuban music that I could have, because he had like all the old stuff. So I was getting Cachao, Arsenio, Benny Moré, some of the Fania stuff, then Machito. Then he was also into Los Bamban, Dandeng, all the stuff that was new from Cuba. He was pushing, and he was telling me more information than I could even absorb, but of course it was repeating all the time. So like little by little, from Carlos and working with him, that was it. That guy was my mentor. Not only that, by the time I was really hardcore because Carlos bailed out of that store like in the early 90s, and then resurfaced on Lincoln Road at this place called Esperanto Music. And so that was like right about the time the Nil thing fell apart for me. And then I started part-timing with him at Esperanto. And he was also into buying up record collections, and then he would liquidate. So he would get just huge, incredible things, and then he would get the best pieces that he could get like a couple $100 for, and then he would just sell the rest like 2 for $5 or 3 for 10. And so basically one of the best ever things that he got, and this is just crazy. But after Mongo Santa Maria passed away, then Carlos knew his daughter, and so Carlos got the rest of Mongo's records, whatever they were. There was maybe 3 or 4 things that he sold out of the rest I got. So the things that I got from Mongo, which was fascinating, was like, first of all, he had a lot of just dedications from other musicians. So like I have one that's from Carlos Embale to Mongo Santa Maria. Awesome. Incredible. And then on top of that, it's like Mongo's own copies of the records he played on with Cal Jader. Wow. And but then even more, you see what was feeding his head. So he had like the Yoruba drumming from Nigeria, and like the things that there was a record store in the Bronx, and later they moved to Brooklyn. It's called the African Music Center. And the guy, he started this label called the Makosa label. But the guy was like, he was bringing and reissuing and selling African records in New York City. And so I guess Mongo would go there and buy like Nigerian records. And like, that was what he was into. And then I had all these 45s that he wrote his own name on the 45, I guess, He went to La Lupe's house and he's there and he's jamming at the end. He's going to take his records home. So that was just Carlos gave me so many opportunities to get records that, some of the best records that I own are things that they're just, things like that. And so having a person too, like that.
When I listen to
I'm always digging. I'm crawling through the streets. I'm crawling through but so a song like Ochimini it's a song like that is coming from a guy like Tomas Diaz. And then the bass line from that song was inspired by Irakere. There's a song called Chekere Song. And so like there's a riff on that song that inspired the bass line for Ochimini. And we were already playing it. There's always like a funk kind of backbeat in our stuff. So that's kind of like the given. And then we had that bass line idea, and we were somewhere in a room like working on that record, and Tomas came in with the refran, and then that's how that song was. But I wouldn't do an Afro-Cuban song without a guy like Tomas or Lázaro Alfonso, because it's not authentic then,
Well, it's amazing.
So all of those things that happen to do with, as far as Spam Allstars playing Afro-Cuban stuff, it's because of Tomas or Lázaro or somebody that's bringing that, because I don't bring that. I can feel it, and I can like, like somehow like envelop it into what we're doing, but that is not, that's not my culture. So for Tomas, that's what he brings, and we didn't have vocals before then.
How have you managed to have such an incredible lineup of musicians? You have collaborated with, for me, with the best of the best musicians, local musicians that are here, international too. Let's say Aaron Levos, let's say Chad Bernstein, Mercedes Zaval, Tomás, Jose Elias, John Speck, so many. I mean, it's, the list is amazing, right? Goes on and on. Um, Tell me about them, because you don't find the quality of musicianship every day on live music shows.
Well, I feel like very fortunate that most of those relationships evolved in a very organic, almost natural happenstance kind of way. But I've also, with every single show that we've ever done since almost the beginning, I've made sure that everybody gets paid for what they do. So I think that I have no idea how other people conduct their business, but I do think it was just kind of like important to me from like day one that, and I mean, I'm saying before we started playing Héroe Como Ayer, we're talking about like I was maybe getting $150 from a club. So, but that would still go to like, okay, we all got $50.
Mm-hmm.
So when things started getting better, at least, there was, no matter what, that was kind of like, there was always, not that it all comes down to money, but I think if you want to have professional musicians, you got to make sure everybody gets paid because they're professional musicians.
Absolutely.
And so I kind of always had that in my mind. And I just feel really lucky that for whatever reason, they thought whatever we were doing was interesting enough that they would want to contribute their ideas. And so all of the music that we've done, there are very few pieces of music that I could point at and say, well, that's mostly me. Maybe, I don't know, 10%. And so every single thing that we've done is everybody's energy, everybody's best ideas, everybody's, and I think that also has something to do with it, because when you're collaborating with, I don't know, it doesn't have to be musicians, but any other artist, when you give the artist a creative stake in what you're doing, then they actually care about it. And so then you're growing something together. And if they also benefit on the back end of it economically as well, then you're all working towards something, and you have something that's, maybe viable.
Yeah.
And so, but I really do feel like it was, it has a lot to do with just everybody being, in a scene at a time, and being able to, there's way more people than that who have gotten on stage and played with us. But and sometimes technically they might be like a better, not better, but technically more proficient, but for whatever reason it wasn't, it was not really, it just didn't feel. So it's a lot of it has to do with the ability for people to have intuition. It's things that are intangibles, honestly,
Know how to
with
work
bands
collectively too, because some people.
Well, you have to listen. A good band, at some point, if you have to kind of play with like a single mind. So if everybody's, and it's harder and harder, I think, for musicians because it's so distracting, So everybody's kind of like, to keep people in the moment of playing, and to really have everything just like only be inside of what you're doing together. it almost is impossible in a sort of live music situation to expect that, but when it does happen, it's such an incredible thing that I feel like, very lucky to have experienced that for as many times as I have in my life, so that's a combination of people, you know what I mean? That is something that is so unpredictable, and it's fragile. It could be ruined in a second, so uh but yeah, it comes down to, giving people respect, giving people a voice within a project, trying to pay people for what they're worth.
Make it serious.
It's all of that stuff. So I don't think it's that hard. I think Miami has just so much talent. There's just so much going on here. There's so many people coming all the time. There's people that are born and raised here that are just absolutely amazing. So, and I see it here now, and I'm recording more, and I'm mostly, my life is recording the bands of the scene, the people that are doing things, that are out playing live like all the time now. So I'm very lucky that I get to kind of like have a ground floor view of sometimes I'm making people's very first recording now,
Awesome.
It's great.
I know.
And so like, I know that there's just still, and there's people I could definitely say I would handpick if I wanted to do like a recording situation, I could kind of like, pick and choose now, and I feel so lucky, so I guess I kind of, when I'm doing stuff now, because I still, sometimes I get shorthanded, sometimes still I'll still be down to musicians for a gig. So I still always kind of like have my ear open for people that are doing interesting things, or getting a sound that a really good sound on guitar, or somebody's like really cool on keyboards, or whatever, I'm just like always kind of like paying attention to that, and
Other thing I wanted to ask you is about the Caribbean and Miami, because you're here in Miami, but at the same time, for me, you have all this African related influence, but you don't hear a lot of conversation about how Caribbean Miami is, if it is at all. If we can say that Miami is part of the Caribbean or not. I would say yes, but I would say this is something yet to be highlighted in a way. Why? Because of the combination of influence. The Caribbean, any Caribbean culture is a combination of not only two, but a lot of different influences, right? But with that African diaspora base there somewhere, always. And I would venture to say that your music, I kind of feel that is one of the things that make Miami more Caribbean, right? This taste of combination of musics where Africa is there in an important way, not only by the African explicit music, but also by the other influence that has also, African influence in the way, in the rhythm, the music. So I don't know. I would like to know your thoughts about it.
Well, first of all, I think Miami is part of the Caribbean. When I look at, I think I was just having a conversation with someone before you guys got here about how Caribbean this neighborhood is. We have a little bit of everybody here. It's very Haitian, but it's also a lot of Trinidadian and a lot of Jamaican. So thinking about all of that, there's, aside from like the African influence, I can say that two really, really big parts of our music that is very Caribbean is it's sound system based music. Like our music from the get-go, like once I started with the beats, I started building a sound system basically. So that's why when you would see us at Roy Comoyed, it would sound different than when other people play at Roy Comoyed, even because I was bringing in a lot of extra sound. So I was bringing in extra subs, I was bringing in extra speakers. The idea of our music is it's very also influenced by Jamaican dub music. So it's an improvised mix happening on a recording desk, feeding a wall of speakers. That's like the whole concept. And so you could move us from a little place like Oikomoyet or put us on a big stage with a giant wall of speakers, and it translates because the concept is that it's sound system dub music but it's happening with other rhythms. We're doing it with dance music rhythms or Cuban rhythms or funk over that. But like like conceptually to me, I've always been into the dub. So that's why you hear a lot of echo and delay and the effects and the things like that. So I think that might be actually the biggest, at least for myself personally, like that's the biggest influence of the Caribbean on it. What we do is like the sound system based music of Trinidad and Jamaica, where it's like all about having a huge truck of sound and like just building a wall of speakers and then just, all that bass. That is something. And then Miami bass itself, like, so Miami's own music of the 90s was like this bass music that people were creating that was all around the 808 drum machine. That is a big part of our music too. So that's personally what I bring into it, is my drum machines, the bass lines that I create, which you could really say that they're, coming a lot from dub. Dub music is basically bass line music, like it's music that's just the drums with the bass line. The bass line's holding the melody. And so really kind of melodic bass lines was something that was, it's like, it all comes from a bass line. Most of our music, it would start there, and I will give the other guys the bass line, then they build on top. So, that's all should make, really, like, it goes back to the music that I was listening to in high school. When I first heard dub music, like, it blew my head open. And then after that, I was never the same. And I was just going for that for a while, and then I still go for it when I produce. Now it's like, I kind of like got all those tools for my studio because I wanted to use those tools. I kind of have like a low budget version that I use when we play live. I do it with guitar pedals, but here I have like tape echo and all that stuff. And that's it. That's what fascinates me, So that's what I see.
Okay. And what about funk? Because nowadays you see that there's kind of a coming back to funk-based kind of music. Like there's a recognition, I'd say, or people are coming back to it. But I would say in places like Cuba, for example, as far as I can recall, and I would say Miami, listening to your music and other people as well, other local bands, that funk was always there.
Yeah.
It would never, left. But how do you see that? Because I'm very happy because what is going on with funk, because funk is such an instrumental part, not only of dancing music, but also of what we're talking about, Caribbean, Cuban music, right? It's been there. So tell me about it. Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, Miami is also a very funky place. So Miami's always had, this heavy Black American music happening, deep bassline music also, and because of certain entrepreneurs that were here starting in the 50s, even the music was getting recorded and it was reaching sometimes the mainstream of the United States. This lured people like James Brown to Miami. He was recording here regularly starting in the late 60s. Also people like Aretha Franklin recording down here regularly. Miami had a sound and a vibe and a thing that like other southern cities didn't have. I mean, Memphis had a thing, Miami had a thing. And so Miami, as we got into the middle of the 70s, though, sort of the funk kind of got erased by disco music. So disco became the thing, starting from when Casey and the Sunshine Band became popular. When they became popular, they were so successful that everything else on that label sort of just got sidelined. And they became, that became the template for like, this is the music that we're creating here is for on the floor dance music. But that really is what is the beginning of electronic dance music and everything else. It all comes from disco music. The first kind of drum machines started coming into disco music by the end of, there's like kind of like a backlash. Everybody was like, okay, they got tired of formula music by the end of the 1970s. But that kind of led into the era of drum machine music, which started almost immediately after, which became electro funk and then Miami bass and later house music. Kind of it split off. So electro funk started, house music also started. House music had 4 on the floor. Electro funk was kind of more funk based rhythms, but it's kind of like the drum machines took over from the natural drummers after a while. but Miami's kind of like the dance music. It's a birthplace for electronic dance music for sure, and I think like grittier funk is always going to be. People are always going to be looking for like, the older style of, you know, funk playing and that like classic, whatever you want to call it, James Brown sound.
Why do you think it's so powerful?
It's certain rhythms. I think certain rhythms are rhythms that, for whatever reason, we respond to. Right. So,
it's a
a lot of them
too,
are
right?
African rhythms, and a lot of them are, even like, that's what I'm saying. 4 on the Floor music, that's caveman music,
right?
So, wherever you like kind of see humans hanging out, you're probably gonna like, at the most basic level, there'll be some kind of like, or just 4 on the Floor music. So I think that's kind of why. I think it's very primal, it's raw.
Gets into right?
But on top of that, you can build anything. So then you could have something as complicated as, Earth, Wind, and Fire, or something as raw as, the rawest funk record you ever heard by people that could barely play. It's like they both work because it's a beat and it's something people can dance to. So
2 last questions. First, I would like you to tell me something about this incredible collection of music that I see we have here. We're surrounded by.
Well, that's what we've been
This
talking
is like
about.
A famous place. Let me tell you.
I didn't tell you enough. Yeah.
So please tell me something about this. This is like an archive.
This wall is Funk and Soul LPs, alphabetical. The first 2 rows. Then I have 3 rows of hip hop, basically mostly hip hop 12 inches. Behind me is all Cuban records, and then Puerto Rico, Latin jazz, some of my Brazilian records. Behind you is all Jamaican. That's all Jamaican stuff.
Wow.
That wall is all jazz back there. Then this wall back here is like fusion, electric jazz, vocals, Colombian music. There's this little wall here is blues and gospel. This room has Haitian records, Dominican records, more Brazilian, African. Then in the back is Miami bass.
How old is this collection?
I mean, it really exponentially exploded around the late 90s, early 2000s, because that's when everybody was just getting rid of a lot of stuff. But I've been collecting records since I was like a boy. So records that I bought when I was a boy, I still have them, and then everything else. So really, it went from hundreds to thousands during the late 90s, probably. So I went from always being a collector, but then CDs were a thing. I liked CDs when they first started coming out, because it's like all this stuff that you never could get all of a sudden came out on CD, so it was cool for a minute. But records were a lot cooler. Because then it was like for $1 you could get like amazing stuff.
And what do you know? What do you do with them? Do you really know what they are, where they are?
At this point, I kind of could get. I could probably trim the fat a little bit. Like I might not need like so much catalog stuff. But I like having the original object, and that's my format. So if somebody called me and they're like, "Oh, we want just a Stevie Wonder set," well, I could just bring like a crate of Stevie Wonder records and just do that.
Nice.
So that's kind of nice. It's like having a library, and plus it's my collection, so it reflects my experiences and like where I've been and the places that I've gone and people that I've met, and like some records I might remember where I got them or the person that I got them from. Maybe it was another DJ. I have DJs who don't even know that I have their records because their record was in the thrift store or whatever, But so it's like it's like a thing all together. It's like it has it's a different entity. I may have to live off it one day. I might have to sell records to get by one day. It's very possible. So it's kind of like it's like my savings in a way. But no, I haven't listened to everything. But if I never bought another record now, I could probably just keep delving in and finding things till I'm 80 years old, you know. But that's like, you know, that's great. You know, I'm good with that, you know.
And you have a studio too. We're gonna take some pictures there, right?
Okay.
And tell me about the studio. I know you are also a producer.
That's it. That's my day-to-day life now, revolves around running the studio out of my house here, which I call City of Progress. I bought this house in 2003. So that's where we recorded our first, the white CD, the Contra los Robóticos Mutantes CD that I recorded when I got in this house. If you look at the cover of that CD, it's basically like a drawing of the house.
Cool drawings, by the way.
That's Lebo. Those 2 albums or 3 albums, Lebo did the covers for that.
Yeah.
And we had you know, he's a buddy of mine. So that was a really nice era of collaboration between us. And, you know, so once I had the house and I had a space and I started with like just 2 microphones. I didn't have any of this stuff. I didn't have like big tape machines. I didn't have a console. I had nothing, just like nothing, really, literally nothing. My first computer and 2 mics, but I had a space. And so that's when I started to record here. Maybe 2-3 years later, I had a little tape machine and a little bit better stuff I got for nothing. And then I started recording other people. And then as the time went forward, you know, we had been doing so much touring, and I felt very frustrated with the touring, and like I was putting a lot of resources into it. I was still not enjoying that. And I just started feeling like I wanted to grow this more. Plus, I'm getting older, you know, so I was like, man, like, what am I going to do, like, when I'm 50, which is like now? So I thought, well, okay, like, let me start what I could do with this. And getting more and more into the vintage, I said, okay, I don't see other studios into the vintage. I don't see other studios rolling tape. I know that people want to roll tape. And so that's where I was moving. And, you know, the musicians that I work with are basically people that want to roll tape. They want to use vintage stuff. I'm cheap. You know, I get to like, because it's cheap, it's like people can afford to come here and like be experimental or make their first recording or transfer their old tape. And
do you intervene in the process?
Not necessarily, mostly not. It's because most of the artists that come here have their vision, and I don't want to like impose. I just want to make it sound as good as it can or help them get to the sound that they want. But sometimes people want a little bit, and then, you know, I'll pour my heart into it. But it's either way, I'm just really just trying to like, you just have to make people happy so that they can do their best thing. So if they're not, then that's when things can start to suck. So basically, just from the minute that people come in, you're just like having fun and keep everybody like loose and keep it sounding. It's got to sound good in their headphones, and then, you know, hopefully, and then I get to be in there and hear something amazing. You know, that's like it's the biggest thrill. So that's kind of like where my heart is now. And now I have like a second place at the Bridge, which is a studio Northwest 7th Avenue and 42nd Street, like just north of the overpass. And it's like a space where people have different other artists share the studio space. It's like satellite studios and then a big live room.
I've been there. Yeah,
so I can use it for, you know, when it's like too many people for here or somebody's allergic or whatever, you know. So that's it, you know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys, man. It's great.